Hey gang, it's Reverend Lee again. We're with another video for the assembly this week. This week I'm standing in the church's vestry. This is a vestry. Now a vestry is the place where we keep all of our church stuff, but most importantly, our vestments. That's where we get the word vestry from. And vestments, all these different colourful things, vestments is basically just a posh word for clothes. That's where we get the word vest from. So this is the room that we get ready in before church. It has all of our stuff in it, you can see. And it's actually in the base of the church tower. You know that big tower that you can see from all around the town? Well, that's our church tower, and this room is right in the basement of it. Look, if I show you, I can show you the roof, look. Whoa, see? And that hatch there, that's the hatch where you lift the bells through into the top of the bell tower. Or you would, but we don't actually have any bells in our bell tower because we built the tower and then run out of money. So it's a bell tower without bells, but it's still a pretty amazing thing. And it's not that old, actually. It looks really old, doesn't it? But it's only about 50 years old. So some of your grown-ups might actually remember when this bell tower was built. So that's pretty cool. You could ask them about that. Now, I'm in here this week because I'm trying on some church clobber. There we go. Because on Friday, I'm being ordained a priest. So lots of you probably think I already am a priest, and I sort of am. At the moment, I'm a deacon. So you get ordained deacon first in the Church of England. And a deacon comes from the Greek word diakonos, and it means servant. So I'm ordained as a servant of God and servant of the people of God, which is all of you. But on Friday, I'll be made a priest. And one of the interesting things about going from a deacon to a priest is that I'll wear this thing, my stole, differently. So at the moment, I'm practicing being a priest for Friday, so I'm wearing my stole like this. You see? It's hard to show you. Oh, there's a mirror here. There you go, look, I'm wearing it like this. And that's how a priest wears their stole. I'm not actually a priest yet. I will be on Friday. At the moment, because I'm a deacon, I wear my stole across me like this. And the reason that deacons wear their stole across is because it's supposed to represent carrying a towel. And that towel is to remind me and the people I serve of the story of Jesus washing his disciples' feet. See, Jesus strapped a towel around himself and he washed all of his disciples' feet. Do you remember that story? And it was in that Jesus was saying that if you want to be a leader, if you want to be a Christian leader, it's not about how much power you have, it's not about how many servants you have, or how much money you have, it's the opposite. It's about how you serve other people. As Christians, and anyone who wants to be a Christian leader, but as all Christians, we are called to serve other people, to love other people. That's the example that Jesus set for us and asked us that we should follow, that we should try to be the best servants to others. Now, it's interesting because that really fits in with this week's parable, which is the parable of the persistent widow. Now, this parable is also sometimes called the parable of the unjust judge or the corrupt judge. And that's because judges in biblical times, just like today, super powerful people, really high up in society, lots of authority, and rightly so. But the judge in this story, rather than using his authority and his power for good, to help and to serve other people, he uses it for his own ends. He doesn't really care about helping others at all. So Jesus tells a story all about that. So let's have a look at that now.
The parable of the unjust widow, or the corrupt judge, is another one of Jesus' special stories that he tells his followers in order that they might begin to better understand the message of Jesus. Now remember, a parable is supposed to prompt you to ask questions, to examine how you feel about the story and what you think might be going on. And that is the most important thing about them. It isn't what I think, or what your teacher thinks, or what anyone else thinks for that matter. I mean, we've got ideas for sure. But the most important thing is how this parable makes you feel. Because Jesus is telling you this story across thousands of years through the pages of the Bible. And he's doing it because he wants to know what you make of it all. So, as I said, judges in biblical times were similar to our judges today, who help keep law and order by overseeing the courts and our legal system. But a better analogy might be a politician, as judges during the times of Jesus had a slightly different, more powerful role. And people came to them with their problems, just as they do today with their local councillor or MPs. Also, a widow, which is a woman whose partner has died, in biblical times is a bit different to a widow today. You see, Jesus and his followers lived in a very patriarchal society, which means that women could only really survive if they were married to a man who could provide for them. So if their husband died, they could be left with absolutely nothing. And this is why Jesus so often talks about widows and orphans and uses them in his parables, because they were the poorest and most vulnerable people in his society. So let's retell this parable with a 21st century setting. There was once an elderly woman who lived all alone. She had no friends or family left, and her ill health meant that she found it difficult to get out and meet new people. She was not a wealthy woman either. In fact, she had very little at all, and often had to choose between turning on her heating or having a hot meal. She couldn't afford both. The flat where she lived was freezing cold in the winter, but the landlord refused to mend the old windows or fix the ancient radiators, which cost her so much money to run. One day, whilst praying, she said to God, "Do you know what, God? Enough is enough. I'm going to speak to my local MP about my wretched landlord, and I won't stop until she forces him to meet his responsibilities." And so that's what she did. She started writing to her MP every day, and phoning her 3 times a day, and emailing her 10 times a day. She even sent the odd pigeon when she could coax one in off the landing. Now, unfortunately, the lady's MP was not a very nice person, and had absolutely no interest in her constituents' situation. In fact, she had very little interest in anyone or anything other than herself. Neither did she give God a second thought, believing religion and that sort of thing to be for less educated people. "Who is this mad old bat filling up my inbox and sending flocks of pigeons chasing after me?" she cried. Now actually, a group of pigeons isn't called a flock, it's called a kit or a loft, but the MP didn't know this. Again, she believed that kind of thing was beneath her. "Why on earth does she think I should give a damn about her double glazing? I've got far more important things to worry about than one chilly old widow." And so she had one of her staff reply to the lady, refusing to help her and demanding that she stopped bothering her MP, who was very busy and important. But the lady didn't stop calling and writing and emailing and texting. She even got into Snapchat and TikTok and started her own YouTube channel. And every night, as she lay in bed talking to God, she said, "I'm not giving up, you know. As long as I've got you in my corner, then I am not giving up." A few weeks of this passed with still no word from her MP, but then, one afternoon, her phone rang. It was the newspaper. They'd seen her Twitch stream and wanted to run with the story. "Maybe this is it," she said to God that night as they spoke. "Maybe now someone will listen to me." Well, the next morning it was all over Twitter. "Poor widow left to freeze by local MP." Now the MP's phone was ringing even more than usual. But it wasn't just Our Lady calling her, no. It was other newspapers and radio stations and TV channels all wanting an interview. It was charities and campaign groups demanding that she meet her responsibilities as an MP. And it was her bosses who were incredibly angry with her for making them all look bad. And so, in the end, the MP came to see the woman. "What would it take for you to leave me alone?" she demanded. The old woman looked at her and she replied, "For you to take your responsibility seriously. For you to use your power to help others and not just yourself. For you to realise that you are a servant and that you have the privilege to serve those less fortunate than yourself." The MP stood silently for a moment, towering over the old woman in her designer heels, before suddenly bursting out with laughter. "Ha! Well, that's never going to happen, you soppy old bat. But I'll get your landlord to fix everything if you promise to just leave me in peace." And so that's what happened in the end. The MP did the right thing, but only because she had to. And so in turn the landlord did the right thing, but only because he had to. And the old woman, well, she got double glazing, a brand new combi boiler, and went on to become an internet sensation, starting a page for those people who felt ignored or overlooked to come together and stand up against injustice. She also created some pretty rad gifts. So here are my thoughts and feelings about this parable, but remember, these are just mine. You must find your own. I think Jesus is telling us something about the importance of persistence and never giving up, especially when we're fighting injustice. Also about the value of prayer in our struggles, about how we can and indeed sometimes must rely on God to help us through difficulties. The old woman prayed to God every night, and in this prayer she found the strength to keep on fighting. In fact, much about our way of life, which we take for granted today, came about as a result of Christians who, strengthened by prayer, stood against injustice and demanded change from those in power. The abolition of the slave trade, the civil rights movement, universal suffrage, which means votes for all men and women, the NHS, free education, social housing, all of these ideals and many, many others were won in part by Christians who persisted in love and prayer in the face of power and corruption. Another important point that I take from this parable is, as I was saying at the beginning, the idea of being a servant. Jesus tells us that if we are to be his followers, then we must truly be like him, the servant king, and seek to love and care for others, especially those less fortunate than ourselves. Jesus makes the point throughout the Bible that the more power we have, then the more responsibility we have. Yes, I know, Spider-Man, but Jesus got there first. So the judge in our story, or the MP, has a massive amount of power. And so, Jesus says, they have a great burden of responsibility to use that power to help others. And now, whilst most of us aren't as powerful and important as an MP, we will all have times in our lives when we have the opportunity to help others, when we have the power to cheer up someone who's feeling sad, or to be a friend to someone who is alone, the power to stand up for someone who maybe can't stand up for themselves. We all have the power to love. And so Jesus says we must persist in exercising that power, in loving and serving all those around us. Now just imagine if all the super powerful people in the world actually did that. Let's end with the Lord's Prayer. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For the kingdom and the power and the glory are yours, now and forever. Amen. God bless. See you next week.